Welcome to Homeward. I'm Jim Burns, and I'm so happy you've joined us today. It's actually an honor, but you are not going to want to miss a moment of this podcast. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever said or thought something like this about your marriage? I can't live like this. One of us has to leave. Have you ever been lonely in your marriage? I have. Have you ever grown weary of playing second fiddle to other things like your husband or your wife that they put in front of you? If you have, then I have some really good news for you today. My guests are Ron and Nan Deal, and Nan has felt like this, Ron has felt like this, and they know heartache and they know distance. But their story is a story from pain to intimacy. Someone once said, before freedom comes pain. And we're going to talk a little bit about pain in marriage and pain in life. Now, I'm not going to say developing intimacy is easy, but it can be done. And when you are finished with this podcast, I think you're going to really say, wow, they brought me hope and they brought me some healthy tools to work on my marriage. And I told Ron and Nan, before I introduce them, just recently, that when I read this book, and I just said this to a friend of mine, Doug Fields, that this is one of the best marriage books I've read in a long time. I love this book. Ron and Nan, they're my guests today. And he and Nan have written a powerful marriage book. It's called The Mindful Marriage, Create Your Best Relationship Through Understanding and Managing Yourself. I know that's a mouthful, but hey, it's practical on every page. When Ron and Nan Deal suffered really what was a devastating loss of their child at a pretty young age, their marriage was nearly shattered by their destructive cycles, and they were at wit's end. I would be. And they sought the help of pioneering therapists, Dr. Terry Hargrave and Sharon Hargrave, whose restoration therapy has helped millions through the practice of what they call emotional mindfulness. Now, I know that's a mouthful, but they went and got help. And this help changed their life, and it's also changed the life of millions of people. Ron is a marriage and family therapist with more than 15 published resources and an international conference speaker. He and Nan have a ministry together, and it's an incredible ministry, marriage enrichment and step family education. He's a podcaster who frequently appears in the national media. And this latest book with Ron and Nan, co-authored by them, but also with family therapist, Dr. Terry and Sharon Hargrave. And I'm telling you, it's a very powerful book. Ron, Nan, welcome back to the Homeward Podcast. Ron, you've come back. Now, this is for your first time, Nan. Great to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Jim, it's good to be back with you.
Yeah, so good. Life has not always been easy for you all. Actually, I've been in a relationship with Ron long enough to know the story. I mean, there was a loss of a child.
Yes.
And Nan really coming to kind of a crisis when you said, I can't live like this. I mean, one of us has to leave.
Mm-hmm.
I think most marriages have heard that. Tell us, before we go on to other things, what's the backstory to that conversation, and what's the backstory to the conversation we're having today?
Well, the pack your bags, it's either you or me. It preceded Connor's death. So it was 2 years before we lost our middle son, Connor, at the age of 12. So that was 2007. But what preceded that was years and years of just pain and baggage. From us bringing that in, from family of origin to having an overworking, traveling husband, to really, I saw my boys on the cusp of this middle school age where they needed their dad.
Right.
And actually, I was tired of getting left and lost in the shuffle. And I met him one night with a couple of suitcases, and I said, okay, it's you or me, get us some help. And he proceeded to get us some help from Dr. Terry Hargrave. So we spent a couple of years working with Terry. So thankfully for that.
Timing was God's provision.
It really was God's provision, because then 2 years later, the bottom drops out. And I want to preface that by saying not all marriages are going to end because you lose a child.
Right.
We had truckloads of pain before Connor passed. So, but I'm grateful for God's provision, for his help, because, we could have been a statistic for sure.
Yeah, right. Jim, I would say preceding that day when she said, it's you or me, we can't live like this anymore. our marriage looked like a lot of other people's marriages in the sense that,
Sure.
somebody's overworking, somebody's handling kids and doing home stuff, and we're sort of drifting apart from one another. And in that sense, we're no different than anybody else. But what we came to learn, what the Mindful Marriage book is really all about, is what was behind all of that. What was driving Ron to work the way I was? What was driving Nan to feel great sense of abandonment in the anytime I left the house? Like, what was that all about? It was that stuff that we had to unpack that helped us begin to turn a corner.
Isn't it interesting? Because when you say, I thought maybe this was right about the time of the loss of Connor, but if you wouldn't have had that experience, it would have made the loss of Connor is horrible, period.
Yes.
But it would have made it even tougher on a marriage. I said to my wife, Kathy, we've been married 50 years. So and we are doing marriage conferences all the time, et cetera. And we've had these kind of same conversations. But I said, I wonder if we would have lost a child, if we would have made it.
I mean, there's a vulnerability in all of us, I think, at certain places in our life. And without a doubt, Nan and I have said many times since coming out of all of this stuff that had we not had our crisis before and our help from Dr. Hargrave before Connor died, I don't know how we would have survived it.
And I appreciate it. Your role modeling that you went and got help. The Bible says where there's no counsel, the people fall, but in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. And Ron, you might have been forced because there was a suitcase you were looking at.
Yes, that's exactly right.
But to make the bold, courageous, right move to go get the counsel, and you just happen to have one of the great counselors in the world.
Yes, we did.
To do that with. So what you're telling us is it's possible to kind of move from a lot of pain toward more peace.
Yes, that's right.
Yes, there is. But it takes work. It takes work because I'll never forget some of those first sessions. And I remember him nailing Ron and Ron kind of having that first come down of, okay, I think I'm going to start my journey with humility. But I remember, I call him Terry, saying to me, and Nan, if you will allow God to heal that brokenness in you, it's going to be the most beautiful part of you. And I remember looking at him and saying, I don't understand what you're saying. Because I was still so full of pride. And he said, if you'll just allow God, well, God didn't heal that until after Connor. So it was the beginning, seeds of that.
But it was a long journey for both of us.
But it was a long journey for both of us.
And it is a long journey. And it's, I find in our own marriage that for Kathy and I, we are still dealing with things from our past. Both of us came from broken homes. I came from alcoholism. Kathy came from just kind of what we call sometimes a silly family. And so we had to, we brought that with us, and we didn't know what to do, and we still bring it with us at times, and even though we've gotten a lot of help, and I remember being in a tough situation like yours, and somebody came to me and said, "You are our marriage mentors." And I was like, "You have no idea."
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I mean, the truth is, I mean, what I love about this book is that I've come to learn that this is the human experience. Everybody on the planet, I don't care what you've done, what kind of work you're involved in, pastor, marriage leader, whatever it is, you're still human. And this is the way the mind, body, soul works.
Right.
And if you don't understand that part of you, you'll continue to be a victim of it.
No, exactly. You used the word mind, and I had circled a phrase that you had in your book. You both needed a new mind or a new mindset. And how did you go about finding that new mindset? You kind of referred to it a little bit with Terry talked to you about.
Absolutely. So what Dr. Hargrave helped us figure out was, it's the language of the New Testament. It's the Pauline theology of the old self and the new self. And what I've come to understand is that part of my old self, the fleshly sin nature that I have, part of it has become a neurological rut in my brain and body, such that runs my life when I get triggered, when I feel like our usness is off, when I feel like life isn't going the way I need it to. And that thing drives me far more than I realize. And it's a part of my old self. And to take that off, to use Paul's language, and put on the new self that is being renewed in Christ means that I have to wrestle with me big time.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't think most people would just want to do that much work. I think they just want to find a quick fix.
Sure.
They want to move on. They want to pretend as if. And in marriage, what we do is we look at the other person and we say, until you get something straight, we're not going to be okay. And we just totally put the responsibility on the other person and absolve ourselves. And none of that leads to anything that's useful or good. And it certainly isn't transformative.
Yeah. I've heard you say at other times, and I've read in your books on step parents, like I've always said that, I use, if somebody has an issue in step families, well, Ron Deal, just read him. But, what happens is people come into even a second marriage and maybe they were thinking the grass was going to be greener, but they're doing the same stuff. They didn't do the work. And so then they find themselves in even more of a mess.
That's right.
And so what you're saying is even in a first marriage, you've got to do the work and it takes work. Now use the word usness. There's a phrase that you use in the book called nurturing usness. How do you nurture usness? Because I want that. Every listener, every person watching on YouTube wants usness, but sometimes that's nebulous. It's hard to get to. How do you nurture your usness?
Yeah. We think of usness as that thing that you created on the day you got married. When you committed to one another and said, till death do us part, you created a new living organism, and that's your usness. And like a child that's born to a marriage, you got to feed it. You got to care for this thing. It's not going to grow up. It's not going to mature. Right. It's not going to develop character unless you continue to look after that. Yeah. Now, usness is formed from both of us as individuals, who we are and what we bring to the equation, if you will. The usness is more, though, than the sum of its parts. It is the dance that we dance. It is the patterns that we create. It is the music that we sing, so to speak, or play along with our dance in our marriage. And most of that is often really, really good. I think for most couples, they have a lot of good and there's a lot of love behind how they dance with one another. But every once in a while, we all get what we call dysregulated. And that's when you basically feel some threat. You feel afraid that your usness isn't strong, or wait a minute, are you as committed to our usness as I am? And it feels like you're kind of slipping away a little bit. You spend a whole lot more time on your phone these days than you do looking at me and talking with me. And it's those moments of insecurity and anxiety about us that triggers us as individuals to then do things that, as it turns out, makes it worse.
And I think for me, as I've dealt with my pain and I have learned about my pain, but I've also been mindful of Ron's pain and learned his pain, I have become a better partner in our usness. I'm so bringing my best self. And it's just blessed the usness. But also when I can take off my pride, my selfishness, my self-centeredness, and see him for who he is in his pain and the things that he does in his pain, and know that he's going to get to the peace part, there's a better us.
Yeah, no, that's well said. You guys have a phrase in the book that says, love flourishes when identity and safety are secure. That's kind of what you're talking about. I want you to unpack that phrase.
Yeah, the Beatles were great, by the way. Love the Beatles.
Hey, me too. I didn't know you were a Beatle guy. I'm like,
well, I'm not as old as you, but
I saw. No, honestly, I love. It was 1964. It was the Ed Sullivan Show. That's before your time, but I was there. I was watching, not at the Ed Sullivan Show, but on a little black and white TV. But
you were watching.
Thus, we digress.
We digress. They sang "Love is all you need," right? And it's a great mantra. And you want to rally the world toward loving one another, and of course we do. But here's the truth: love is not all you need for relationships to thrive. You have to have emotional safety. Trust is the common word that we use for that. And without trust, I won't risk my heart to you. I won't give. I won't. Jesus is the example of self-giving love. And how do I give if I can't trust that you're going to treat it well, or care for me, or receive it, or that you'll return in kind? And so all of a sudden, marriage becomes a game when you can't trust. So you need love and trust. Safety is what results when those things are in place. And by the way, let me just unpack safety, because that sounds like a kind of, well, what does that mean in marriage? Here's an interesting little thing we talk about in the book. How does your brain respond to a sense of I'm not being loved, or a sense of I'm not safe with you? Your brain responds the exact same way, Jim, that it responds if you were to walk up on a rattlesnake. If you were to have a bear, you were to turn the corner and, around your garage, the side of your house, and there's a bear standing there. Your brain goes into fight or flight. It goes into self-provision. Mm-hmm. It is no longer worried about taxes or caring for your children or how you're going to get to work the next day. Right. All of that is gone, and it goes into, how do I survive? Right. And the fascinating thing is your brain does the exact same thing if Nan criticizes me. Right. If I feel, oh no, I see disappointment in her eyes. Am I failing again as a husband?
Or I'm controlling the narrative.
In those moments, I react the exact same way in self-preservation, and I am trying to just manage the situation so the worst does not happen. I'm afraid for our usness, so I go into fight or flight reactivity, and we flesh out what that looks like in the book. But the point is, unless I recognize that that's part of my old self, then I will just keep doing it and blaming her in the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Isn't that interesting? In the book, you had two questions. Am I loved? Am I safe? And you said that's what pain asks.
That's right.
And so I think sometimes even, you and I identified with you, Ron, on some of your, life in the book. And I was telling you before, Kathy, she hasn't read the book yet, but I will identify it with Nan. And so when I get criticized by Kathy, I'm like, well, I think I was helped by your book, but am I really loved? Am I safe to talk to her because she's criticizing me? And my people in my office don't criticize me. People when I'm speaking don't criticize me, or if they do, right. They do behind my back. And so the person I want the most affection from, and the most love and the most security and all that, is now telling me probably a truth about me, but I feel pain. Yes. There, and I don't sometimes feel safe. Well, that's really interesting. Listen, we're going to have to take a quick break. We'll be right back. Ron and Nan Deal talking with us today. We're talking about a brand new book called, and I mean a brand new book called The Mindful Marriage. You can get it where our show notes have on show notes all things Ron and Nan Deal, as well as about the book, The Mindful Marriage. Just such a great book, such a great conversation. When we come back, we're going to get into pain. And we'll be back then. But it'd be real quick break. Don't go away. Hi, Jim Burns here from Homeward. There are so many great things happening at the Homeward Ministries. And you know what? The greatest thing is my new friend, Marcus Preciado, who is our new president, an incredible leader with great vision. And he's going to tell you a little bit about some of the new things.
Thanks, Jim. Everyone, so excited about what God has for us here at Homeward. And thank you for being a part of it as well. To give you a sneak peek of what's coming next year and beyond, we're going to be expanding our podcast team, bringing new voices and new faces. We're very excited about that as well. Also, Homeward Hubs. We're going to have feet on the ground in every region of the United States so we can have hands-on ministry and take Homeward to the nation, as well as establishing Project Homeward, which is going to be a resource like no other to help families succeed. So thank you for being supportive. Thank you for being part of our community. And as this year is ending, I want to encourage you to pray about generosity and being a part of what Homeward's doing, and we can partner together to help families succeed.
Welcome back. I'm Jim Burns, and man, what a great, powerful conversation of two incredible people. Ron and Nan, I want to get right to it. You ask a question, what's your triggers? And then you go on and say, let's find my pain story. We've alluded to pain. Find my pain story. I actually did the work in the book. I don't do this with every book, by the way. And I don't read it cover to cover. I do read all the books that we have interviews with, but this one, I did this work and it was really insightful for me. So, how do you find your triggers, and then how do you learn your pain story? And then what does that mean?
So there's a simple little exercise in the book, and it is very revealing. Yes. It basically helps you understand what are the things that I carry with me that when those things are activated, that I'm hypersensitive to, feeling unloved and feeling unsafe. What does that look like for me?
Yeah.
And then what do I do with it?
Yeah.
And here's what's scary. When you identify that, and that little exercise takes 10 minutes. When you identify that, I'm here to tell you, you will spend the rest of your life learning how to take it off and
You
put
will.
on a new, like it will follow you because it's
You will.
neurological. It actually happens to be embodied at this point. And so it's not an easy thing to deal with. And yet it is the key to changing who you are in the toughest moments of your marriage.
Yeah. How was it for you, Nan, finding kind of your pain story? What did you do? How did you look at that?
Well, it was hard for me in the beginning of our marriage as I brought baggage in to understand, why is this always coming back up? And I always wanted Ron to fix it.
Yeah.
And yet I didn't want him to fix it. That makes sense. I have this therapist husband. You're going to give me all this advice, but I really don't want it. I just want you to understand it. And there were years where it was just very hard for him to understand. I feel like once I found that it was abandonment, and then it made sense. It's like family of origin, have an abandonment story. I have an abandonment story with Ron and the work. I have an abandonment story with my son and the loss of him and going into that with God. And I think it really wasn't until Connor passed that was just kind of the straw that broke the camel's back for me.
Yeah. Right.
And the decade of poor coping that I got caught up in, that once I hit bottom and then started really working on my pain story and trying to really trust God with it, the healing started, and it was like an epiphany of this is truly my story. And just last week, it's Thanksgiving, and I am hit one day with the trifecta of abandonment. All in an hour, there are 3 things coming at me. We're at the grave, my mom's come to visit, and then something else happens. And I am feeling it in my body. And I have to brag on my husband, because 5 years ago, he really wouldn't have been in tune. But the work that we have been doing with this, he stepped in and truly saw my pain. And it was just a phrase that he had. And it was just so beautiful. And I was like, oh my word, I feel safe here.
Yeah.
I can trust him. And so it's just been a lot of things for me, but it's also been seeing Ron's pain and not seeing his pain as, oh, well, that's just you overworking. His pain is tied to his performance. And I always thought he loved to perform. He wanted to perform. He was living to perform. But when I started to see his pain, that's why he's doing those things, then I could lower my anger and my control and my frustration over that and truly see him for who he was and what God was trying to heal in him. If that makes sense.
That's by the way, Nan, that's so beautiful, and how you talked about the authenticity of talking about, understanding your pain, but then bringing that pain. I'd said earlier in the conversation, before freedom comes pain, and so sometimes we have to face our pain to get some of that freedom. Even in terms of the relationship that you would have with Ron, who, by the way, I was speaking, Ron, at one of your conferences years ago.
Yes.
And I got to see you in action. It was at Mariners Church in Southern California. It was a national thing. And I just went, oh my gosh, he's amazing. I've never seen anybody, speak like this. So you did so good. So anyway, your performance is also very good. With me looking at pain, I found, and I never think of myself like this. People, they go, you have the strongest self-image. What is wrong with you? I've at time devalued, alone, underappreciated, controlled, out of control, disconnected, all from my notes from your book. And that's, people very close to me would say that. When I shared that with Kathy, she went, you do?
Yeah.
I mean, so
Jim,
we need some work to do. Yeah.
We spend our whole lives hiding this stuff.
Yeah.
We do. Every one of us. And yet we all know when we go home that at the end of the day, when everybody's gone and we're laying in bed and we're thinking and we recognize, boy, I just don't feel anything like other people. perceive me as. So for me, I felt inadequate. I chased inadequacy my whole life. That was the pain that was driving my performance. So I would perform in every space of my life, even if it meant sort of taking me away from her.
Yes.
But by the way, I was trying to perform as a husband and as a father. Yeah. So I was, working double, triple, couldn't cover all the bases. Guess what? I feel like a failure.
Yeah.
And that's the very thing I'm trying to avoid. Yeah. And so it brings out the worst in me.
Isn't that
everybody has something.
We do, and we have to recognize that. We'll get better once we kind of recognize, and that was the process with you all. Now there's a spouse couple pain cycle. Mm-hmm. So that's an interesting difference.
So here's the thing. I have a pain cycle that, again, the book helps you identify. Mm-hmm. Nan has a pain cycle. And guess what? The devil in his greatest tyranny of our lives will collide those pain cycles, such that you kind of heard it a minute ago from Nan. She said, just recently, I was able to come alongside her in a moment of pain because I've finally come to see, I have compassion for it and to understand it from her point of view. What I used to do is try to control her pain because it made her angry and bitter and hard to be around, and who wanted to be around that? And it was scary for me. And so I would try to control how she was reacting on the outside. Well, that was me and my pain cycle. I need peace. I don't need criticism. So I'm going to shut you down. That's my pain cycle colliding with her pain cycle. Guess what? That's ugliness for the two of us.
Yeah.
And it's instantaneous, and then it's just in a loop. And it's the dance that we do every time. And it's what couples say, oh, how did we get here again? Oh, how did we get here again? Yes. And that's the loop that we were on for years.
And just to be clear to the audience, we're not saying we did this 24/7. No. We had plenty of fun and enjoyment and enjoying our kids and loving one another and happy times in our life.
Wonderful.
But it could all switch on a dime. It could all go away.
Rear its ugly head.
It felt so incredibly fragile. And when it did happen, it was this same cycle over and over again.
And I think...
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I think the things that we do in our pain, the things we turn to, which really are our flesh, can be an instantaneous decision to withdraw, to numb, to be angry, to control, to argue, to use words. I mean, those things, you can do them in a nanosecond, and it just becomes a part of you. It could also be the lies that the enemy is telling you as well.
So key and so critical. You wrote in your book, and I think what we're talking about, and I actually took this and added it to some notes on something I'm writing. I'll quote you on it. You said, choose to be emotionally healthy and you find much more peace.
Yeah.
So what I hear you saying is, you're not saying it takes work and you got to work, but when you choose to be emotionally healthy and do the work, you really, in pretty much, you're going to find more peace.
You're going to find more individual peace.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're going to find more couple peace. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, it's the challenge. As we've struggled to kind of think of how we help communicate all of this to people, Dr. Hargrave's incredible principles and Sharon and the work that they've done for years in an academic world. How do we present that in this book to people who are just trying to do life every single day? Mm-hmm. And it comes down to this. Look, you fell in love because you loved you offered the best of yourself to this person. That's why you got married. There's a lot that you have. And when you're at your best, you are a loving individual. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But when you're at your neurological worst, you are not. You are reacting out of pain to one another, and you're making things worse. Yeah. Learning how to discipline, put on self-control about your pain, and do something different is a journey that moves you out of being stuck. And that's so, I mean, what you said earlier about before freedom, there's pain is exactly right.
And I'd like to say about that example that I gave earlier about Thanksgiving. Old Nan would have stayed in that pain for weeks. Right. Old Nan would have ruminated over those three situations and then probably punished Ron for those things. Old Nan would have withdrew. She would have ruminated, and it would have been weeks or a week or more.
And I would have been walking around on tippy toes.
He would have been walking around on eggshells.
Sure.
I would not have been in tune with my body, with my emotions, with my pain, and known who I could go to with that pain. He asked me that day, he said, "What do you need?" And in a moment I said, I need to get out of here. But really what I was saying is I need to go on a walk. I need to get with God, and I need to talk to him about this pain. I need to lament a little bit about this. And I also need to talk to him about how I can trust him with this. And then what does he say about me?
Yeah.
And we went on with our day and the rest of the week. And I'm telling you, that would have ruined the holiday probably. And it would have gone on into the next week.
I mean, you talk about a couple's peace cycle, and I think you just described it.
Yes, she did. That's what it in real life. That's what it ends up bringing you. The pain cycle is the reactivity that we have based on stuff that's just embodied. It's actually neurological at this point in our lives, and it's in your brain, it's in your body, and it happens instantly. The peace cycle is the choices we make to live and respond out of truth rather than out of pain. And that's the discipline, is moving out of pain cycle into peace cycle. And let me tell you, the Hargraves, we give them all the credit. We collaborated with them. This is their stuff. We just helped bring it to a wider audience. And at the end of the day, it is very practical, and you will map it and sequence it in the book and actually write it in such a way that you now know what to do.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, I did that. I have my notes right here. It's fun on the YouTube channel. You can see this. I don't have the book. I'm going to keep this because it's just, I copied this because it was a pre-book, whatever they call those things.
Pre-published. Yeah.
Pre-published. Yeah. And, but now because it's underlined, because I did the work, I'm going to keep this, and, I'll get a book, but I'll pass those books out. But yeah, the Hargraves are brilliant. What you did was you made it practical for us. And there's not a person who would read this and not be helped by it. So we don't have much time left. I want to ask this question. What question didn't I ask that needs to be talked about?
Well, I want to toot the Hargraves horn one more time. I like to tell people all the time, 3 therapists and a regular chick wrote this book and collaborated. It was really important to me to lower the cookies on the bottom shelf for people like me. Truly. I mean, I've read cemetery stuff and it really has hurt my head. And so, no, I really am grateful to God for how he has used this in our marriage and in our usness. And I just want to bring that to other people who are still on that loop and struggling because there is hope.
Yeah.
There truly is.
I'm going to end with this. The New Testament is replete with the idea that we can grow up into Christ. We can mature, we can change. And the Holy Spirit is deeply invested in growing us all up. And I think our relationships, marriage is the biggest one, but parenting's another, right? We could talk about that too. Sure. And by the way, there's a point in the book where we say, okay, everything you've learned, now apply it to your work world and your parenting, and it carries over into everything. But we can grow and change, and we don't have to remain stuck. And there is a process that will lead you down that path. Now you got to do the work. There's no easy steps. There's no quick fix. Do the work, and you will love where you end up.
You got to trust God with it. Trust him in the process.
I appreciate that so much. And there's studies that show that if couples who are in a troubled marriage will work on it for 5 years and persevere, 78% say that their marriage is better off. Well, what I hear you saying is, we need to play at our marriage, and we need to enjoy each other and have fun and serious fun, but we also need to work at our marriage. And this is what we just did, was we rolled up our sleeves and we worked. And I think a lot of our people are helped now. But again, I want to remind them that the book is now out, and I really strongly suggest that you pick it up. Ron, Nan, thank you so much. Nan, by the way, the 3 therapists and a chick, I think what you said today was profound and incredible. So if you had anything to do with this book, and you brought it to a lower shelf for the rest of us, you did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Right. You're kind.
You guys are great. Anyway, so good to be with you. Wow, what a great conversation today. Ron and Nan Deal. I think we could have talked a lot longer. Like I said, this book has really had an impact on me in a beautiful way. And friends, it is worth purchasing the book. And I don't say that on every podcast, as you know. and then doing the work. So good. And Ron Deal, who I've known for a long time and appreciate his ministry. And then with Nan getting to have her part here, even more profound. So, I think Ron's great, but I think I'm a new fan of Nan here as what she had to say. If you are anything like me, then you learned a lot from this conversation. And I am so grateful. And I love my job here at Homeward. And I love being able to bring great conversations like this to you every week. And so if you know someone who needs this, I can't think of anybody who's married who doesn't need this. And by the way, when he said parent, I thought to myself, they need to write a book now, The Mindful Parent, because this does fit so much. I thought about it with some of our situations in our own life. But anyway, if you know somebody, let them know, pass this podcast on, review it, subscribe, do all that kind of good stuff. And again, my thanks to Ron and Nan Deal. Great job. The mindful marriage is what we've talked about. Until next time, I'm Jim Burns. Thanks so much for listening.